Hello, everyone. I'm Ari Worthman. I'm the Director of College Counseling at Lakeside School in Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, Jed Appelruth, who is the founder and CEO of Appelruth Tutoring, a national test prep company that many of our students at Lakeside School use and have had great experiences with. And Jed is considered a national expert on the topic of standardized testing. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the SAT and the ACT, and how to choose which test you should take. But Jed, thanks for having this conversation with me. It is always good to see you.
Always a pleasure, Ari. I'm happy to be here today.
Thanks. And I just have a few questions that I think will be helpful for any student or family who is listening. So Jed, for each test, which courses should students have taken at least partially before taking the test?
All right, so when it comes to the SAT and the ACT, you need to have a basic foundation in certain math classes. You have to have had good experience with Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and some geometry. So when it comes to those tests, we tell our kids, if you are currently enrolled in Algebra 2 as a junior, you shouldn't take any tests until the spring quarter. So we're looking at taking either the February ACT or the March SAT as the first one, because there's a good deal of Algebra 2 on these tests. You don't need, calculus, things beyond that. But, there's a lot of Algebra 1. And geometry, there's, a fair bit of it on the ACT and not, and about a few questions on the SAT. But ultimately, if you've taken Algebra 1, geometry, and at least one semester of Algebra 2, then for math, you're good. When it comes to reading level, the level of reading on the SAT is in about an 11th grade reading level. And on the ACT, it's about a 9th grade reading level. So on the SAT, they're using more advanced topics, older texts, harder vocabulary. So ideally, you've had a good, solid foundation in reading through your 10th grade year. And if you are, let's say, a little remedial in reading, you might want to wait also a semester until, again, that February ACT or that March SAT. If you're, a little bit behind with reading, or if you're English as a second language student. However, if you're in an advanced reading class, English class, then in that case, you're good to go once you begin your junior year. And so if you are in accelerated math and reading, you can start this thing once you wrap up your sophomore year. Otherwise, some students would want to benefit by waiting until one semester in as juniors.
Got it. Jed, I heard you say that the ACT has more geometry on it than the SAT. So for a student that maybe feels that geometry is not their strong suit, would you advise that they maybe at least consider or take the ACT rather than the SAT?
Well, so if geometry is not your strong suit, the SAT, when it was redesigned in 2016, they scaled back geometry dramatically. It used to be about 1/4 of the questions on the SAT. Now we're talking, it's about 6% of the questions on the SAT. So typically you'll see maybe 1, 2, or 3 questions of geometry on every SAT. So it really is almost an afterthought, whereas algebra is almost 2/3, Algebra 1, Algebra 2. So geometry, if you are weaker in geometry, it's a much bigger deal. It's about 1/4 of the questions on the ACT, but not at all a big deal on the SAT. So if you have a hard time with geometry, I consider looking more closely at the SAT, which is more of an algebra test.
Got it. Good to know. I've also heard there's a difference in the pacing of the exams. So therefore, for a student that works slower or needs more time when they're answering questions, is one test a better fit than the other?
Yes, that's right. So again, with the redesign of the test back in 2016, the College Board decided they were going to back off of speed. And so what they did, they kept the test the same length, but they really cut back the number of items. So now you have roughly 40% more time per question for every question on the SAT. And so that makes the ACT, by comparison, a much speedier test. So kids who are, prepping for the ACT, they're doing timing drills, they're working, with your clock, trying to get the intervals shorter and shorter, whereas you have quite a bit more time per question on the SAT. So that does push kids often towards one test if they move at a little slower pace. In that case, the ACT may be very challenging.
Yeah. Going back to what you were saying before about the difference in reading levels between the two tests, would you therefore advise a student that feels that reading is not their strong suit, reading is harder for them, maybe they haven't taken as many advanced classes, would you advise them to steer more toward the ACT than the SAT?
Well, reading, the level of reading on the SAT is more advanced. You have, again, harder texts, more like, 1700, they have old English text, they have more advanced vocabulary, and there's more reading everywhere. You have more advanced reading on the writing section than you see on the English for the ACT. You have more advanced reading on all the reading passages. It's harder reading. You also have a lot more reading on the math section. There's more reading, more deep word problems. It's really, can I read all this text and pull the math out? So if kids have a harder time with reading, for many students, the ACT can be a better option. But again, before you decide, you want to make sure you go ahead and take practice tests of both, getting baseline tests to figure out, given all these differences in levels of reading and kinds of math and then pacing and so forth, the best way to find this out is taking a baseline practice test of each, or using the PSAT or the pre-ACT as proxies for the full-scale tests. And so that will really help you. But yeah, in terms of guidance, if a student, I learned they have a harder time with reading, they have some reading challenges, they have some learning differences, or, when it comes to reading, for many of those kids, because of the lower level of reading on the ACT, that may be a better test for them.
Mm-hmm. Got it. You mentioned the PSAT, the pre-ACT. So obviously students can ask their school counselors, is that an opportunity that their school offers to take those tests? But I know you referenced there are other types of mock and practice tests that students can take. Where can students find and access these mock/practice tests?
Sure. So we have the official tests in your school. But then beyond that, there are kids who are taking advantage of the Khan Academy, and they've partnered with the College Board, and they have 8 full-scale practice tests, and you can take those and use timing. And also there are practice tests available on the ACT. They have a site where they have on digitally a couple of free practice tests. You also can purchase for $20. You can buy a book with 5 ACTs, and these are scaled, normed tests. Additionally, if you want someone to help you proctor it, control the timing and so forth, there are companies out there, all over the country who are going to offer you free practice tests. And just make sure they're using official tests if possible. And then you can get an actual baseline using a previously standardized normed test that administered by these testing agencies.
Got it. So quick point of clarification. I just heard you say, with the different test prep companies that will offer some of these mock and practice tests, that students should be sure they're using real tests. So to find that out, they just need to literally ask the test prep company, is this a formally administered SAT or ACT?
It's way better because part of it, it's not easy to calibrate a test and get everything just right, the level of difficulty of all the questions. And the College Board, the ACT, they spend a lot of money making sure these tests are calibrated accurately. There's no bias in the questions. So it's great companies build their own tests for practice, which is fine, kind of giving you exposure, giving you practice, but to really get a sense, to help you calibrate an accurate baseline, you really want to use a test that's been normed and standardized, using a big national sample, which most companies aren't doing. They're writing them, they're trying to imitate them as best as possible, but to really give you a sense of how ready I am and where's my actual baseline, it's always better to use an official test when you can.
Good to know. Well, Jed, as always, you're always a wealth of information. And what everyone watching this video should know is if you want to learn more, Jed is the author of tons and tons of articles and blogs about standardized testing. I read almost all of them. They're very rich in content and research and accuracy. So if you're interested in learning more than what you just heard today, whether it's about which test to take or other topics related to standardized testing, advanced placement tests, and the college process, I would definitely visit the apparuth.com website. As I said, Jed's pieces are top notch. But Jed, as always, thanks for this information.
Anytime. All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone.